François. So I'm very happy and very honored to come here. It's kind of a comeback because I was a student a few years ago, a long time ago, because it was in 2004. And I remember I had Professor Dean today, but at that time Alan Rosen was a professor, so he was one of my teachers 15 years ago. So I'm kind of thrilled to be here, and thank you, François, for your presentation. And as you say, it's a bit thanks to my book that I had the opportunity to meet with Mounir Mahjoubi, because I was invited by my first employer just after the MBA. I had the chance to work for the Ministry of Finance and Industry, which was kind of an ancestor of the Ministry of Digital today. And they invited me for a breakfast to talk about my book. And so I presented my book to all the members of the minister and so on. And at the end of the breakfast, I told them, well, the promotion of the book is finishing, so I'm looking for new position. If you hear about anything in the medias or in the digital, just let me know. And they told me, well, you know, there is just someone who quitted the staff of Mounir Mahjoubi, Minister for Digital. So if you want, you can meet him. So I met him like this, and he was very intrigued by my book, because La fin des idoles is a book talking about how society invaded with screens and social networks and medias and so on. And Mounir Mahjoubi was one of his ambition, of his political ambition, was kind of fighting the excess we can see on the social networks, especially the hateful content we see on Twitter. I don't know if you are on Twitter. I'm on Twitter since 2009, and it's really awful, because all the comments, it's only insults and hate, and it's not enjoyable anymore. It's not like when it emerged a few years ago. So Mounir wanted to do some things about it, and it's also one of the themes of my novel. So that is how we met. So I'm here to talk about the French assets in the digital world and the politics of the government in this space. And actually, we have a very ambitious digital agenda for France in 4 main areas. And I've just one slide I wanted to share with you, which is a slide about our roadmap. So it's in French, because it's actually what I used when I was chief of staff of Mounir Mahjoubi. And it just shows all the actions we wanted to put in the first semester of 2019, so this year. So it's just the slide after this one, yes. So you don't have to read it, because as you see, there are a lot of different actions. But what is interesting to see here is you have 4 main colors. You have the light red, which is about companies, and we will talk about it, especially about the French tech. This is the first area of attention we had. The second is about the transformation of the public service, and this is very important, because France is quite lagging behind some countries. I will talk about it later. We had a big actions on skills and inclusion of all the people that are not familiar with the digital. And there are quite numerous people still in France today. And there is a huge issue about the regulations of the GAFA, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and so Twitter, and so on. And this was a main area of attention as well. So the first area of attention is about the French tech. And as I told you, in 2004, when I graduated from the MBA, my next job was to work for the French Minister of Finance and Industry. And this was the ancestor of the Minister of Digital. And I was in charge of helping the financement of startups. And actually, at the time, I met with different private equity funds, and I met with Xange. So it's quite fun to have Nicolas tonight, the leader of Xange Innovation. And the world changed a bit. In 2004, France had a lot of issues about financing startups, financing innovations, because it was very difficult. You didn't have many private equity funds, especially in early stage. And I remember that Xange was one of the first private funds focusing on early stage. And at that time, the private equity for innovation in 2004, I remember it was about 700 million euros invested in the startups. And a lot of I've been parcouru, I don't know, since that time, because in 2018, the investment in France for private equity in innovation, for the venture part, was not 700 million, but 3 billion plus 700 million. So it's it's really a huge achievement that we did, thanks to private equity funds and thanks to all the also the public investment that we put in place since all those years. So it was quite a bit of satisfaction, but still there are still some issues for the French tech. So the French tech was created in 2013 as a label in order to show the world how many cool startups we had in France and to make them more famous internationally. It worked quite well, but we still have an issue in France as of today, and the main issue is about scaling up. We have a lot of young startups, we have a lot of small startups, but how many unicorns? Do you know what a unicorn is? Of course you know. No? A unicorn, it's self-explanatory. No, a unicorn is a term used to design this to talk about the startups which are still private and which has a value of more than $1 billion. So, do you know how many unicorns we have in France today? 4. 4, exactly. Yes, we have OVH, Deezer, Doctolib, which is a very recent startup, and BlaBlaCar. Yes, exactly. But with 4 startups, do you know how many there are unicorns in the United States, in China, in India? Do you know that the number of unicorns in Europe is smaller than the number of unicorns in India? So really have something to do about this, and this is about scaling up. This is about the startups growing and attacking international markets. So we try to do something different for this, and that's why, for instance, we worked a lot with Mounir Mahjoubi and all the ministers to attract the best talent worldwide. So I won't take all the I won't talk about all the actions we did, but just 2 examples. We launched the French Tech Visa last March. And the French Tech Visa, it's a procedure helping to attract the best international talents in order to make their life easy when they want to work in France. So it's very, very easy for them and their family to get a visa and to work for the French startups. Another example of what I did is that we attracted a lot of big names, especially in artificial intelligence. We had this big plan for artificial intelligence that we launched in March 2018. And there was an item on it which was to attract a lot of international labs on AI from the biggest companies in the world. And as for now, in Paris, you have a lot of international companies having their labs. For instance, you have Facebook, which, by the way, is led by Yann Lequin, a French. So the Worldwide Center of Facebook on AI, it's in Paris. You have 3 labs from Alphabet. You know, Alphabet is Google. So you have an AI lab of Google. It's also DeepMind. You have a lab in Paris of DeepMind. And you have Jigsaw. It's also an Alphabet company. And they also have an AI lab in Paris. You have Microsoft, you have Fujitsu, you have Criteo, you have a lot of big international names having set up international research centers in Paris and in other cities. So this is also very important in order to attract the best people and to help the best startups have the best talent and being able to sell worldwide. So these are 2 examples of what we did on the French tech side. I'm happy to tell a lot more about it, but I'm sure you will have many questions about it. About companies, we worked also not only for startups and French tech, but we worked also for SMEs. We had a lot of SMEs, and this is an issue in France compared to other countries in Europe. For instance, in Germany, the SMEs are much stronger than in France and much more innovative, even if they are not startups. So we try to push to have an action on SMEs and, for instance, on e-commerce. SMEs selling worldwide thanks to e-commerce on marketplaces. And we discovered, meeting with a lot of entrepreneurs in charge of those SMEs in all French region, we did a tour with Mounir Mahjoubi, and we discovered that some of them had a lot of difficulties with the biggest marketplace, and for instance, Amazon. And also the marketplace sometimes, because sometimes we had some cases where I remember it was a SME selling books in Alsace, so eastern France, and one day they disappeared from Amazon, and they couldn't do anything about it. They didn't even have someone to call at Amazon because there was not even a phone number. You know, they could send emails to some robots, and they didn't have any answer, and there was no human behind. It's like a few years ago when you try to talk to your, you have a problem with your telecom operator, and I worked for Orange, so I know we had to work a lot about this, and it's sometimes you have to wait for hours on the phone before to reach somebody who will be able to solve your problem. And so these SMEs had similar issues with big marketplaces because they didn't have anybody to talk with, and for some stupid reasons, and we discovered with this editor the issue because Mounir, for instance, said to Amazon he was not happy with this, and Amazon looked at the issue, and they said, well, it's because the Eastern French company selling books, they didn't send the good formalities, the good administrative formalities, the good form, and so we had to dereference them from our base, and they didn't even know why, you know. So we had a lot of work with all the marketplaces in France in order for them to sign a chart of best practices and some engagement from the marketplace that they will have a human being able to answer to the small companies when they have a problem with the marketplace. So this is an example of what we did for companies. We work a lot as well on public service. And well, you know, I was quite surprised because I saw a study from Les Echos last year when Mounir Mahjoubi was invited to speak to a think tank of Les Echos with a lot of entrepreneurs and so on. And it was about the digitalization of service public. And I was happy to see that the French people had quite a good opinion. I thought they had a terrible opinion about the digitalization of the service public, but no, they had quite a good opinion, and they thought that the public service was even in advance compared to some private companies in terms of digitalization. So it was quite satisfying. But when we did international benchmarks, we saw that we lagged behind some smaller countries. For instance, Singapore is very, very advanced in terms of digitalization of the public service. In Europe, you have Estonia. Estonia is very advanced. And it's a bit easy, I think, for Estonia because it's kind of a younger country with many more younger people. Even at the government, the Estonian ministers are very, very young, usually in their 30s. Like Mounir is actually. Mounir Mahjoubi is 35, but all his colleagues were much older. And so it's easier for a country designing their public service from scratch to have them digital in the first place. In France, it's much more difficult because you have such legacy of paper public service, paper forms, and so on. And the president, Emmanuel Macron, and Mounir took this engagement, this campaign engagement, to have 100% of administrative formalities digitalized at the end of 2022, at the end of the presidency of Emmanuel Macron. And I worked a lot about it, because what does it mean to have 100% of public administrative formalities digitalized? How do you measure it? How do you measure the progress? And I did a tour of all the ministers, you know, the interior, justice, education, health, and so on. And they were not even able to tell us the number of different administrative formalities that existed. So we didn't even have the total of it. So it was very, very difficult to measure the percentage of them that were digitalized. So I worked a lot with all the ministers, and Mounir worked a lot with all his counterparts to have a prioritization. And what we did is that we asked to all his colleagues to tell us what is your top 20 of the administrative formalities that are the most used by the French. So each told us their top 20, and we asked them also to add the formalities with more usage at 100,000 a year. 100,000 a year. And thanks to this, we had a top usage of, it was top 250 public formalities. And this is what we say, we want this to have digitalized by the end of 2022. And we want to have a roadmap of how is it going to get digitalized. And we could measure the percentage, and today it's 60%. So we still have a long way to go. But all the ministers are working on it. We worked a lot also about innovation in the public service. We worked about open innovation with startups, entrepreneurs in residence, digital designer in residence working on public services. We did a lot about artificial intelligence with tenders in order for the administration, the public service, to present projects that for which they are wanting financing and that will use artificial intelligence. And for instance, some were developed. For instance, the Ministry of the Finance developed a service that will help to automatically detect in the region which are the companies that have the biggest probability to suffer from bankruptcy in the next month, in order to call them preventively and to have a negotiation with them, with their lenders, and especially the public lenders. For instance, the tax is a public lender, because when you need to pay your tax, but sometimes if you're in bankruptcy, you can negotiate when you will pay this tax. So this is an example of artificial intelligence developed for the public service and used by the administration. So we did a lot to foster innovation within the public administrations. So this was the dark red. Then we work on the violet part, the competency, the skills, and the inclusion. And do you know how many French people say that they are not comfortable with the digital? That they are not even able to send a CV by an email? Do you know how many French say that? Yes, 20% of French people. So this is huge. This is huge. And we had a plan for them. So we tried to segment this population, and it's a bit more than 10 million people, 13 million people. And we said on these 30 million people, there are 3 million, they say they are not familiar, but they just need to go on the web, and they will manage it. So we don't have to worry about this 3 million. We discovered that there were 5 million of people that we could train. And if we trained them, actually they could do it by themselves. And so we launched in late March with Edouard Philippe, the Prime Minister, a program which is called the Pass Numérique. It's a digital formation, digital training, exactly. And the idea is when you are, for instance, in a public house on the field, and if you have someone coming and you see you are a public agent in a, how do you say, mairie? A township, yes. So you are welcoming people in a township, and you see that someone seems to be unfamiliar with the digital, and you will be able to propose them a training which will be financed by the government and by the regions, the cities, and some private companies, and they will benefit from 10 hours of digital training. And we tested it, and it worked quite well, because 70% of people using it said, well, now I'm able to do the basics with digital, and I don't fear it anymore. It was not very, very expensive for the public finance. So that's what we launched in March. And there are another population of 5 million people, and usually they are old people, and those we thought that it would be too difficult to train them. So our idea is to do on their behalf. So we will train public agents to make sure that they will do the public formalities for them on their behalf. Usually they are very, very old people. So this is an example of what we did on skills. We worked a lot also for training people from the suburbs, for making sure we had more women working in digital, more women entrepreneurs, and Mounir, had the responsibility to appoint a lot of people to several responsibilities. For instance, the National Council for Digital, for the head of the French Tech Mission, and so on. And systematically, it chose women to make sure that the women would be more and more represented in the future. So this was one action about the skills and the inclusion of everybody. And last point, but not least, regulation, especially regulation on the GAFAM, on the social networks. So we worked a lot about the fake news. We passed a law on it last December. We worked a lot about hateful content, and we wrote a project of law which will be presented to the French Parliament in this month, in June. And the idea is that now the Twitter, the Facebook and so on, they will have 24 hours to remove any illegal hateful content. And if they don't do it, they will pay a fine of 4% of their turnover. So it's quite dissuasive. And we also designed a new kind of core regulation because you have a lot of what we call gray content. And gray content is something that is not completely illegal, but it's not nice to have it on the internet, and so we won't fine it. But what we'll do, and this will be discussed in a future law, we will enforce the social networks to be transparent about what do they do to moderate the content. How many people they put, what are the algorithms they use to moderate the content? What are the algorithms they use to push the content on the first place in your page when you open your Facebook and Instagram and so on? Because it's not transparent today. You don't know how they use it. And the French regulation, the French regulator, it will be the Conseil National, the Conseil Supérieur de l'Audiovisuel, Audiovisual Council, will have specific people trained with artificial intelligence algorithm and so on that will monitor what kind of algorithm are used by Facebook and Twitter and so on, and they will associate the civil society. So there won't be any fine and so on, but they will have a kind of social and political pressure much stronger than today on the social networks in order to make sure that they invest the right amount of energy in terms of monitoring and fighting the hateful content and the fake news. And actually, Facebook invests a lot, but we don't know if it will, if they will do it forever, and we don't know if they do their best, and we don't really know how they do it. So in the future, we'll know this better. And some other companies don't invest much. For instance, if you think about Twitter, well, Twitter, they are not that profitable. They don't have that many money, so they don't invest on this. And that's also why on Twitter, you see so many hateful content. And I talked a lot with journalists, even people I meet for my book and so on, so not for the government. And they say me, I post sometimes on Twitter, but I don't look at the comments anymore. It's not useful because it's only insults and hate speech, so it's not constructive anymore. So I think some social networks have an issue and they need to invest more, and by the law they will be forced to be more transparent and to invest more in moderation. So that was an example of what we do. We also worked a lot to tax the GAFAs because, as you know, they make a lot of profit in European countries, but all the profits are taxed in the US or in other countries, not in Europe. So we worked a lot in order to be able to tax the turnover in France. So do you have any?
Yes, we can take a couple of questions before we launch the table ronde, the panel discussion. Who wants to ask the first question?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much. So I actually have a question about the last topic you shared with us. with regard to the tax issues. Just a couple of days ago, I have a friend of mine who was thinking about creating his company and deciding whether he's going to be based from Estonia, which is taxed like at 20%, or whether he's going to be based like in Paris, which is like around 45%. And I'm very happy to see all those, schedules and plans. But is there something for young entrepreneurs, helping them to, develop something from their country they've been born, instead of, going to Estonia, which is a very lovely place? But what is your...
So you said 45% of tax in France?
Or like 40, or yeah.
I think it's more like 30, but yes, this is an issue of tax competition between European countries, and this is really a European issue because some countries like Ireland, Luxembourg, and so on plan of being competitive just through taxes. But it's like a prisoner game, it's not a win-win situation for the Europe. So, of course, there are discussions at the European level. But if you think about, if you talk about the startups, about innovative company, they don't have tax like this, because when you are innovative company, you have a specific status, and you don't pay revenue tax like the bigger company. You have a lot of reductions. As long as you are innovative, so you invest in some R&D, or you invent a new product and so on, and this is a specific status called Jeune Entreprise Innovante. And you have also a lot of tax incentive for the private equity funds, for instance, the Fonds commun de placement dans l'innovation, so innovative private equity funds. So, of course, we know there is this big issue of taxes at the European level for the biggest companies, but when you're a small company, and especially an innovative company, you won't be taxed a lot in France, because there are many incentives to help you set up and grow in France.
Hello, good evening, sir. My name is Mary Dumbia. I'm happy to see you here today. And I would like to congratulate you. I don't know if it's a congratulation for resigning from the post that you had, but I think you did well. My question is, you talk about a lot of women in the digital capacity, helping women or opening up for the global market so that the women can have the opportunity in digital capacity, and women in government. I'd like to know from you if you have any idea, or whether you've outlined something that could help, because today women are lacking a lot of a push-up in finance, a push-up in everything to help the woman to go forward, especially women with children. For instance, I finished my bachelor degree 10 years ago. I'm in France here for 10 years now. I thought of doing my MBA for about 2 years ago. The question has always been money. Where do I get the money? I worked, and then I was paid 1,200. After paying everything in the house, what is left up? What is left for a woman to actually enhance on her professional education to be at the top where you want us to be? We are lacking something. We want to push. What is your outline? What's your outline to help women today to move forward? Because I was really touched by the word when you talk about women, helping women. And I would like to know if you have any plans, or if the École du Point have any plans of helping women to go forward. Thank you very much, sir.
So actually, for the École des Ponts, I don't have the answer. Maybe François has, but as you saw, the ENPC MBA was created by Celia Russo, a woman from Argentina. So I think this is the DNA of the ENPC MBA to push forward more women, and this is a big problem that won't be solved like this, we need to have role models and to push more women in the spotlight, and that's what Mounir did in appointing Salwa Toko at the head of the Digital Council, Kate Borlongan, which is the head of the French tech mission, and actually they are, both are from other countries as well, you know, so they are both French and both from other countries, and they are women. So the spotlight is one answer. We did a lot also to work on the training, especially the young girl, because what you observe is that the tech schools, there is some kind of pattern in France and I think in many countries, that when it's too technical, it's for boys. And there is really a pattern. And for instance, if you take the engineering schools, Centrale, Les Ponts, Les Mines, Polytechnique, and so on, you have 70%, 80% of boys and 15-20% of girls. So this is and this is why we need the role models, and we need to work on the culture of the young and of the teenagers to show them that they are also able to do technical stuff, and it can be fun. You know, it's not only a boy thing, and it can be as fun as other professional careers in fashion or beauty or whatever. So this is a complex problem, but Mounir worked a lot about this training stuff as well, discussing with, for instance, with the head of École 42, Xavier Niel, and Station Ref, and so on, in order to train very young children and to learn them how to code, and to make sure that in these code schools for not even for teenagers, you know, for very, very young children, we developed code schools, and we made sure that in the code school you had 50% of boys, 50% of girls, and so on. So that's what we try to do. I know that for women working and having children as well, it's kind of difficult, but I know that Mounir met with some entrepreneurs. For instance, he met with a woman who has children and who developed startups and who lived in co-location just in order to reduce the cost of living and be able to invest in her startup. So there are some kind of solutions like this, and Mounir spent just one day living with this young woman, and there is a video on his Twitter if you want to check, in order to help to design new solutions, but it's undergoing process.